Jay, if we contrast to people, or rather a team, who has been accustomed and used to playing CAF Champions League football, we've been flying the South African flag for all of us, I guess, because Pirates are not there, Chiefs are not there, Stellies have only just come into CAF competitions right now. Mamelodi Sundowns, Jay, with where they are, a point away from qualification, and the number of goals that they've scored as well. They haven't scored a lot of goals. With where they are in the group, obviously on the verge of qualifying, playing at home in their next game, do you believe that they're still favourites? And how far do you think that this team can go? Because they're not as dominant as we expected.
Yeah, Chuck, it's hard to say favorites, right? But then when I think about what else is happening in the Champions League, the most impressive teams have been in the same in the same group, which is Orlando Pirates and Al Ahly, right? When you then think of Esperance, they've qualified as well. I just forgot who's second in their group, and they went all the way to the final. Then you have one of the semifinals from last season, TP Mazembe, who are bottom of their group. And given that's the group that most people thought is the group of death. But it tells you the nature of African football, right? And what I mean is it doesn't look like there's a team that is absolutely dominant. So even though I recognize that Sundowns have taken a step backwards, the feeling is not, man, they are so far behind team A, B, C, and D. But at that same time, they don't feel like favorites. At the moment, they do not feel like favorites. When you consider what has happened with Sundowns recently, where there's been a coaching change, and it feels as if Miguel Cardoso is continuing to learn this team. I watched the match over the weekend against Maniema, right? And I thought he didn't quite get his personnel right. I don't think you can play Sellers and Ribeiro together in the same team because Sellers does not stay in the box as a striker. He continues to drop. When he drops, and the front three is him, Reyners, and Ribeiro. Ribeiro, who's playing as the right wing, Ribeiro does not stay in an advanced position. He also wants to receive the ball in the pockets, right? And what has happened with Ribeiro specifically, the tape on him is out there for these teams, and these teams are planning around Lucas Ribeiro in terms of as soon as he receives the ball, the defense collapses on him. And what I saw from him is he then continued to go deeper to receive the ball. At some point, he was moonlighting as the DM or as the number 6, right? And if you have one of your forwards that far deep and you have another one deeper as well, what needs to happen essentially is your midfielders need to fill those spaces ahead. But that's not how the Sundowns midfielders play. Umkwena is the 6. He's not all that advanced. You had in that game Kulisa as well. You had Allende as well, and they don't really go into the box. You don't think of them the same way you think of, for example, a Castillo at Kaizer Chiefs, who makes those late runs into the box and becomes an auxiliary striker. So there's more balance when you then have a Matthews who comes in, and what you saw earlier in the season when it was Matthews, Reyners, and Ribeiro. Ribeiro is the creative, and Matthews and Reyners, they stretch the defense, they make the runs. Shalolile comes in as well. He's more comfortable in the box, and then he scores the header for the equalizer, and he forces the own goal to win that game. And all of that suggests to me that the coach is still figuring it out. And on a positive sense as well, in that game, the opposition really didn't create many chances. The goal was a mistake. It's the same goal you saw Ranga score against Mamelodi Sundowns, where those centre-backs against a physical striker, they're a bit soft, to be honest. And I think this is true of football in general, right? Because we've got all these guys who are like ball-playing centre-backs, and in terms of that rough and tumble, they're not really about that life anymore. So when they come up against a striker who's physical, it's a hard knock for those defenders. But at the same time as well, the home Gwena, like he was giving instruction to one of his teammates while he's supposed to be falling back, and by the time he reacted, he did get next to the striker, but he got to him in the box. They don't want to foul him in the box. And then also, like, the finish was one you thought that Williams would save that, but he didn't. But for the majority of the game, the team didn't do much, which speaks to the positives of what Cardoso is doing. And he spoke about like his rest defense and just defensively wanting to be sound. And Sundowns defend on the front foot because they keep the ball most of the time. And there was a period as well before Maniema scored their goal where it looked magical, if I'm being very honest, Chuck. Like, the rotations. You had Allende who's coming in from the right wing and he's central. You've got Moreno also coming up to the front. You had the midfield push up to the edge of the box. And for a 10-15 minute spell, the opposition couldn't live with Mamelodi Sundowns. So that gives you hope, if not confidence. It gives you hope as a Sundowns fan that when it does click, if Cardoso can get it to click, his football to click, it's going to be effective to the point where maybe you can have Sundowns as one of the favorites again for the Champions League.
I think the fact that you're still on course, obviously if you were out, it would be disastrous. But the fact that you're still on course with the game at home, all in your hands, I still think you guys are dangerous. And with the CAF Champions League being what it is, Jay, it's not a situation where you want to be finishing, or maybe you want to be finishing first, but what difference is it? Because everything is so tight, everything is so close. Because
no, Chuck.
You don't think so?
You prefer to finish first, because if you finish second, you're getting one of the group winners.
That's true, but I'm saying if it's last 8 anyway, I think the other 7 teams are still strong as well. I mean, if it was the last 16, you'd prefer to have the weaker sides because someone weak would have come through. But with 8 remaining teams, I'd like to think that the top 2 teams of each group are decent enough.
So, for example, right, the group where Mazembe are lost, Yanga in that group.
Yeah.
If you ask me the question right now, I would prefer to play Yanga as opposed to Al Ahly in the knockout stages. Having said that, though, right, and I've said this before, and I suppose this is to give Sundowns the best chance of another round to get then to the semifinals. And then knockout football, anything can happen, right? But ultimately, if we're talking about winning the whole thing, you have to play everyone. You have to beat essentially everybody. Whoever is standing at the end, you're gonna have to beat them at some point, right? And maybe actually it is worth playing one of the stronger teams in the quarterfinals, because
make it easier.
That's not to make it easier, to take away excuses that you can build in. Because if you win the quarterfinals, you're in the semifinals, and that's a great run in the Champions League to make it to the semifinals, right? But Chuck, if the goal is to win the thing, you can't hide behind the semifinals, especially because you are now the second coach who has been hired within the space of a season to win the champion, and the job is to win the Champions League. So, yeah, if you're gonna get knocked out in the quarterfinals and prove that you really weren't good enough.